Jackie Robinson, the WW2 soldier who broke barriers and changed sports forever. The sun hung low in the Los Angeles sky, casting long shadows over the dusty baseball diamond where dreams were born and crushed. The crack of a bat meeting a ball echoed through the neighborhood, a sound that should have signaled joy but instead hinted at the bitter realities of life. What does it mean to fight for your dreams in a world that seems determined to keep you from them? I was Jackie Robinson, a young man with a fire in my heart and a dream to play professional baseball, but standing on that field was more than just a game. It was a battleground where I faced something far more insidious than the opposing team, the heavy, suffocating weight of racial discrimination. The sun beat down on me as I adjusted my cap, the scent of freshly cut grass mixing with the anxiety knotting my stomach. I could feel the eyes of my teammates on me, some filled with envy, others with disdain, as I took my position in the outfield, ready to showcase my talent. "Come on, Jackie. Show 'em what you've got," yelled Tommy T-Bone Simmons, my childhood friend and a fellow dreamer. His voice was a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge of doubt that threatened to swallow me whole. T-Bone was my anchor, always believing in me when the world seemed to have other plans. The game began, and I was in my element. With every pitch thrown my way, I felt the rhythm of the game pulse through me. I sprinted to catch a fly ball, my heart racing, adrenaline surging. The crowd erupted as I made the catch, a moment of pure exhilaration. But as I turned to bask in the cheers, I caught sight of the scowls from some of the spectators, a stark reminder of the boundaries that still existed in our society. Just as I was starting to feel invincible, everything came crashing down. A group of older boys, their faces twisted with disdain, shouted slurs from the bleachers, their laughter slicing through the celebration like a knife. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from the rage that boiled within me. I longed to confront them, to show them that I was more than the color of my skin. But I knew better. "Ignore them, Jackie," T-Bone whispered, his voice low yet firm. "Let your game do the talking." But my game wasn't enough. Days turned into weeks, and despite my efforts, I was continuously sidelined from the local teams. Coaches turned a blind eye, claiming they wanted to keep the peace, while I was left to watch from the sidelines, my dreams slipping further away. Then came the letter that would change everything. It arrived on a rainy afternoon, the sky gray and heavy, mirroring the weight in my chest. The draft notice was unmistakable, a stark reminder that the world was at war, and I was called to serve. My heart raced at the thought of leaving behind my dreams of baseball, but there was no choice. Duty called, and I had to answer. "Evelyn, I got the letter," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. My sister, Evelyn, always my strongest supporter, looked up from her book, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern. She had been my rock, my defender, and the one who always encouraged me to fight for what was right. "Jackie, this is your chance to show them who you are," she said, her voice steady, yet soft, as she placed a hand on my shoulder. "You're not just a player, you're a soldier now. You can break barriers, even in the military." "But what if they don't accept me?" I asked, my voice trembling. The fear of rejection from the very people I would be serving alongside loomed over me. "You're stronger than that. Remember, you're fighting not just for yourself, but for everyone who has ever been marginalized," she replied, determination lighting up her eyes. With those words echoing in my mind, I reported for duty. The air was thick with tension as I arrived at the military base, the sounds of boots marching in unison and the roar of sergeants barking orders filling the atmosphere. I was surrounded by men from all walks of life, but the racial divide remained palpable. I felt the weight of their stares, some filled with curiosity, others with suspicion. "Slim pickings," one soldier muttered as I walked by, his tone laced with disdain. I swallowed hard, pushing down the anger that threatened to boil over. This was just the beginning, and I knew I had to be strong. My initial days were filled with grueling training, each session pushing us to our limits. I was determined to prove myself, to show that I was worthy of my place among these men. But the whispers followed me, the snickers and derogatory comments reminding me of the barriers that were still firmly in place. I quickly learned that being a black soldier in a segregated army meant facing not just the enemy, but also the prejudices of my fellow soldiers. Then there was Sergeant Walter Thompson. He was a man defined by his rigid beliefs, a product of his time. I could see the skepticism in his eyes as he evaluated me during drills. He had a reputation for being tough but fair, and I wondered if he could ever see me as more than just a color. "Robinson, get your head in the game," he barked one day during training, his voice cutting through the air like a whip. My heart raced, not just from the pressure of his command, but from the weight of his expectations. I could feel the eyes of my fellow soldiers on me, waiting to see how I would respond. "I'm here, sir," I replied, forcing the words out with as much confidence as I could muster. I knew this was my moment to rise above the challenge, to show them that I would not be defined by their prejudices. As I pushed through the grueling training, my thoughts often drifted back to the diamond, to the game that had once felt like my destiny. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was meant for something greater, something that would break through the barriers of segregation and prejudice. But as the days turned into weeks, I realized that the fight was just beginning. I was no longer just Jackie Robinson, the baseball player. I was Jackie Robinson, the soldier, navigating a world filled with uncertainty and prejudice. And I would need every ounce of strength and determination to rise above it all. The weight of expectation was heavy, but I was ready to carry it. The world had tried to silence me, to box me in, but I would not be broken. I was here to fight, not just for my country, but for every dreamer who had ever been told they couldn't. The battle was far from over, but I was ready to step onto the field, no matter how daunting the challenge ahead. The days turned into weeks as I settled into the rhythm of military life at Camp Hood. It was a place buzzing with energy, where young men from all walks of life came together under a shared purpose. Yet, amidst the camaraderie that burgeoned, I felt the sharp sting of isolation, a heavy cloak of prejudice. That weighed down my spirit. The moment I stepped into the barracks, I was met with sideways glances and whispered comments. The camaraderie I had hoped to find was often overshadowed by an unspoken tension. "Hey, Robinson. You sure you can keep up with us?" One soldier, a hefty figure with a brash grin, called out during morning drills, laughter rippling through the group. I clenched my fists, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. It was a familiar sting, reminiscent of the jeers I faced back in Los Angeles, but here, the stakes felt far higher. These weren't just kids at a baseball game, these were men trained to fight, men who could easily turn their disdain into something more dangerous. "Just watch me," I shot back, summoning every ounce of determination to keep my voice steady. But inside, a storm raged. How could I prove myself among men who had already decided my worth before I'd even stepped foot on the field? As I trudged through the grueling routines, I found solace in my friendship with Tommy T-Bone Simmons. We had grown up together, forged in the fires of shared dreams and disappointments. We spent our evenings huddled in our bunks, reminiscing about our baseball days, plotting our future games, where I could finally showcase my talent without the weight of judgment. "T-Bone, do you think we'll ever get to play again?" I asked one night, the soft glow of the moon spilling through the window. "Of course we will, Jackie. After this, we'll break every record in the league. Just wait and see." His unwavering belief in our dreams was a balm to my worried heart. Yet, as the days dragged on, it became abundantly clear that the war was not merely an external battle, it was also a war against the prejudice that festered within the ranks. The other soldiers had been conditioned to see race before the man. I began to notice how some of them would sidestep me during formations, their eyes averted as if I were an unsightly blemish on their perfect uniform. One afternoon, during a particularly grueling training exercise, the tension reached a boiling point. We were tasked with a simulation that involved navigating a mock battlefield. As I moved through the course, my focus sharpened, instincts kicking in. But as I approached a particularly challenging obstacle, one of the soldiers shoved me aside, laughing mockingly. "What's the matter, Jackie? Scared you might get dirty?" I stumbled, the laughter from the rest of the unit ringing in my ears. Frustration boiled beneath my skin, and I felt the urge to retaliate, to scream back, to let them know that I was just as capable as any of them. But instead, I bit my tongue and pressed on, my heart pounding with a mix of rage and sorrow. Later that evening, I found myself sitting on the edge of my bunk, staring into the void. T-Bone joined me, his expression serious. You can't let them get to you, Jackie. They're just scared. They don't know what they're missing. Maybe, I sighed, but it's hard to ignore when every day is a reminder that I'm different. I came here to fight for my country, not to fight for acceptance. T-Bone placed a hand on my shoulder, the warmth seeping through my uniform. You'll show them. Just wait for your moment. But the moments seemed to evade me. Days turned into weeks, and I was still relegated to the sidelines. I was assigned to the supply unit, a position that felt like a slap in the face. While my fellow soldiers trained for combat, I was stuck counting crates and loading supplies. The frustration gnawed at me, a reminder of the barriers I had faced my entire life. Then came the day I was thrust into the fray. Orders came down for a training mission that simulated a real combat situation. The tension in the air was palpable as the sergeant called us together. Listen up. This is a critical drill. We need to move fast, work as a team. I expect each of you to pull your weight, understood? As the mission unfolded, I felt the adrenaline surge. This was my chance to prove my worth, to show that I was not just the color of my skin, but a soldier capable of bravery. We advanced through the mock terrain, and suddenly, I noticed a fellow soldier, Collins, struggling to keep up. He stumbled and fell, hitting the ground hard. The chaos of the drill enveloped us, but I couldn't ignore the sight of him lying there, vulnerable. Collins! I shouted, rushing toward him, despite the risk. I could hear the muttered objections from the others. What was he doing? Why was he risking himself for someone they'd already labeled? But in that moment, I didn't care. I reached him just as another soldier approached, a look of concern etched across his face. What are you doing, Robinson? Stay back. Ignoring the command, I knelt by Collins, checking to see if he was injured. Can you stand? I asked, my voice firm. I don't know, he gasped, panic in his eyes. Then I'll help you, I declared, gripping his arm and pulling him up. The others watched in disbelief, whispers trailing behind me like a shadow. We managed to reach the safety zone, but I could feel the weight of judgment all around me. As Collins caught his breath, he looked at me, gratitude shining through his fear. Thanks, Robinson. I didn't think anyone would. Just do your part to keep up next time, all right? I replied, the tension in my chest easing just a little. But as I turned to head back into the fray, I caught sight of Sergeant Thompson's stern gaze. He had witnessed the entire thing. The look in his eyes was unreadable, but I could sense a shift, a flicker of recognition. Days passed, and I continued to push through the challenges, my resolve hardening like steel. Each moment on the field was a step toward breaking down the walls, even if it felt like I was chiseling at a mountain. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, I found myself alone in the barracks, the weight of it all crashing down. I sat on my bunk, staring at the wall, the shadows creeping in around me. Would I ever truly belong? Suddenly, the sound of footsteps interrupted my reverie. It was Sergeant Thompson. He approached, his expression serious. Robinson, he began, I need to talk to you. My heart raced as I met his gaze. Was this the moment I had been waiting for? Would he finally recognize my worth? You've shown courage out there, he said, surprising me. Not many would risk themselves for someone else, especially when it's not easy to do so. I nodded, unsure of how to respond. I think we need to have a talk about your role on this team, he continued, a hint of something softer in his voice. Before he could say more, the sound of an alarm echoed through the camp. It was a drill, but it felt ominous, like a warning. My heart raced as I realized the gravity of the situation. Get ready! Thompson barked, turning on his heel. We'll talk later, Robinson. And just like that, the door slammed shut on what could have been a pivotal moment for me. I was left standing there, my heart pounding, knowing that the true test was about to begin. As I prepared for the chaos that was about to unfold, a thought flickered in my mind. What if this was my chance to stand tall and prove not just to them, but to myself that I was worthy? If you want to follow this journey, To see how Jackie Robinson defies the odds and steps into his destiny, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Join me as we unravel the story of resilience, courage, and breaking barriers. Together, we'll witness history in the making. The air was thick with tension as the sun dipped below the horizon during our latest mission in the European theater. The smell of gunpowder mixed with the damp earth as we took our positions in the trenches, the sounds of distant artillery rumbling like thunder in a storm. Every moment felt like a heartbeat echoing in the silence of impending chaos. As I glanced at my comrades, I could see the fear etched into their features, a stark reminder of the stakes we faced. "Jackie, you ready for this?" T-Bone asked, his voice barely above a whisper as he checked his rifle. His eyes held a mixture of determination and dread, reflecting what I felt deep within myself. "I don't think we have a choice," I replied, trying to sound braver than I felt. "We're in this together." As we awaited the signal to charge, I thought back to the baseball fields of Los Angeles, where the only battles I fought were against prejudice. Now, I was in a war where the enemy was faceless, and the only thing I could rely on was my training and the bond I'd formed with my brothers in arms, regardless of their skin color. Suddenly, a shrill whistle pierced the air, jolting me from my thoughts. Without hesitation, we surged forward, our hearts pounding in rhythm with the chaos around us. Bullets whizzed by, and the ground shook beneath us. I could hear the cries of my fellow soldiers, the shouts mixed with the deafening roar of gunfire. That's when it happened. A grenade landed just a few feet away from where T-Bone and I crouched. Time slowed as I saw the flash of light and the shrapnel flying through the air. Instinct kicked in, overriding any rational thought. I lunged toward T-Bone, pushing him out of the way just as the explosion erupted. The force of the blast threw me backward, slamming me against the rough ground. Pain shot through my body, but I forced myself to rise, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I needed to check on T-Bone. As I stumbled back to my feet, I saw him struggling to catch his breath, shock etched across his face. "Jackie! You saved my life." His voice was a mix of disbelief and gratitude, but I barely had time to process his words. The battle was still raging, and our squad was taking heavy fire. In the heat of the moment, I noticed Sarge Thompson running toward us, shouting orders to regroup. The stern look on his face was replaced by concern as he caught sight of me. "Robinson. Are you hurt?" "I'm fine, Sarge." I shouted back, though I felt the sting of pain radiating from my side. "T-Bone's hurt. We need to get him to safety." Thompson nodded, his gaze shifting to the chaos beyond. "We'll get him out, but first we need to hold this position." As I took my place beside Thompson, I couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental had shifted. I was no longer just Jackie Robinson, the soldier. I was Jackie Robinson, the one who took a risk and changed the course of a life. "Stick together, men!" Thompson shouted, rallying us as we prepared to fight back against the enemy. I could see the fear in the eyes of my fellow soldiers, but there was also something else: respect. I could feel it, a silent acknowledgement that perhaps I was no longer seen merely as a colored soldier but as one of them. The battle intensified, and as we pushed forward, I felt a surge of courage. I was fighting for more than just myself. I was fighting for T-Bone, for every soldier who felt the weight of discrimination, and for those who would come after us. Then, as if fate had a cruel sense of humor, I spotted a group of enemy soldiers flanking us. "Sarge! Left flank!" I screamed, pointing toward the danger. Thompson's eyes widened, and he quickly redirected our fire. The sound of gunfire filled the air, but this time, it was different. There was a unity in our ranks, a shared purpose that transcended the barriers that had once divided us. In that moment, I saw Thompson's expression change. It was almost as if he finally understood the weight of my struggles back home. As we fought side by side, I could see flashes of understanding in his eyes. "Robinson," he shouted over the din of battle. "You're a hell of a soldier." The words hit me like a warm wave, filling me with a sense of validation I had desperately needed. But just as quickly, a sharp pain pierced my side, and I stumbled, looking down to see blood soaking through my uniform. "Jackie!" T-Bone called out, panic lacing his voice. I shook my head, trying to push through the pain, focusing on the fight ahead. Keep moving. We can't give up. I urged, forcing myself to stay upright. But the world around me began to blur, and I felt myself faltering. Thompson rushed to my side, his face a mixture of shock and determination. Stay with me, Robinson. You're not done yet. In that moment, as the battle raged on, I realized that I was no longer just fighting for my dreams. I was fighting for every person who had ever been belittled, every athlete who had ever been told they weren't good enough because of the color of their skin. The fight was bigger than any one battle. It was a fight for dignity, respect, and equality. As the chaos of war surrounded me, I could hear the echoes of my sister Evelyn's voice, the words she had shared with me countless times about standing up against injustice. It fueled my resolve, igniting a fire within me that I couldn't ignore. With one final surge of strength, I pushed forward, a renewed determination coursing through me. I was Jackie Robinson, and I would not be defeated, not here, not now. But just as victory seemed within reach, a sudden explosion rocked the ground beneath us, sending shockwaves through the air. I braced myself for impact, but instead, I felt a jolt of realization wash over me. As I looked up, I saw Thompson's eyes widen in horror as he rushed forward, only to be caught in the blast. Time slowed as I watched him fall, and in that moment, everything changed. The man who had once stood as a symbol of the barriers I fought against lay on the ground, vulnerable and human. The realization struck me like a lightning bolt. Thompson had a son back home, a boy who idolized me. In that heartbeat of clarity, I understood that my fight was not just about me or even the soldiers beside me, it was about the legacy we would leave behind. I had to survive this, not just for myself but for every child who dreamed of breaking barriers, for every soldier who longed for recognition, and for every person who refused to be defined by the color of their skin. As the battle raged on, I felt my purpose crystallize. I was fighting for something greater than I had ever envisioned. The dream of equality and acceptance was not just a personal ambition, it was a collective struggle that needed to be fought and won. With renewed vigor, I charged forward, determined to ensure that Thompson's sacrifice and the sacrifices of my fellow soldiers would not be in vain. We fought together, not as individuals divided by race, but as brothers united in purpose. The battle ended, but the war within me raged on. I faced the reality that the fight for justice would continue long after the last bullet was fired. And as I looked around at my comrades, I realized that we were all part of something monumental, a movement that would change the world, one swing of the bat, one act of courage, and one moment of understanding at a time. I would break barriers, not just in baseball but in life, and I vowed to honor the legacy of every soldier, every dreamer, who had fought for the right to be seen, to be heard, and to belong. The journey ahead would not be easy, but it would be worth it. I was Jackie Robinson, and I would not back down. As I stepped back onto the familiar soil of Los Angeles, the warm breeze whispered tales of the past. It was a different world than the one I had left behind when the war called my name. The clang of military boots and the hasty commands of my superiors were replaced by the sounds of laughter and the distant echoes of baseballs being hit. But as much as I yearned for the simplicity of those earlier days, I knew that I was not the same Jackie Robinson who had once played in neighborhood games. The war had changed me. I had seen the darkness of humanity, felt the heavy burden of prejudice, and yet, I had also discovered the strength that resided within me. I had fought not only for my life but also for the lives of my brothers in arms. The lessons I learned in the trenches were far more significant than any baseball strategy. They were about resilience, courage, and the indomitable spirit of fighting against all odds. As I strolled towards the baseball diamond, I was met with familiar sights, kids practicing their swings, the smell of hot dogs wafting from a nearby stand, and the sound of laughter that reminded me of simpler times. Yet, the unease lingered. Would they still see me as a man with dreams or merely the color of my skin? I stood at the edge of the field, watching the kids play. Among them was a boy who couldn't have been more than 10 years old, swinging a bat that was almost too big for him. His stance was awkward, but his determination was evident. I felt an overwhelming urge to join him, to show him that it was okay to dream, to fight against the barriers that life might throw in his way. "Hey, kid!" I called out, stepping onto the field. The boy turned, his eyes wide with surprise. "Want some tips on your swing?" His face lit up, and I felt a flutter of joy in my chest. I approached him, and as I demonstrated the stance, I felt the weight of my own journey, the struggles, the battles, and the victories I had achieved, merging into this moment. I was not just teaching him how to hit a baseball, I was imparting hope, courage, and the message that dreams, however distant, were worth pursuing. As I shared stories of my time in the military, the boy listened intently, his eyes sparkling with admiration. I could see the seeds of inspiration taking root in him, and it filled my heart with warmth. In that moment, I understood that my journey didn't just end with my return from the war, it was only the beginning. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself back on the field, not just as a player but as a mentor. I took the time to work with the kids in the neighborhood, teaching them not just about baseball but about resilience, respect, and fighting for one's dreams. I shared with them the stories of my comrades, the sacrifices made, and how deeply ingrained the fight for equality was in each of our hearts. I watched as they learned not only the game but also the values that would shape them into better individuals. Then, the day came when I received a call that would change everything. Branch Rickey, the general manager of the Brooklyn Dodgers, wanted to meet. My heart raced with anticipation and nerves. Would he see me as just another player? Or would he see the man who had fought against the odds, both on the battlefield and in life? The meeting was tense, the air crackled with unspoken words. But as I shared my story with him, I saw the glimmer of recognition in his eyes. He wasn't just looking for a talented player, he was looking for someone who could break barriers, change perceptions, and inspire a generation. Our conversation solidified my belief that the fight for equality extended beyond the battlefield and into every aspect of life, including sports. When I finally signed with the Dodgers, it felt like a dream had come true. Yet, I knew this was just the beginning of a much larger battle. The weight of history rested upon my shoulders, and I was determined to carry it with grace. The first game came with its own set of challenges. As I stepped onto the field, I could feel the eyes of the crowd on me, some filled with hope, others with disdain. But I grounded myself, remembering the countless faces of my fellow soldiers who had fought for something greater than themselves. I played with all my heart, knowing that every swing of the bat, every run, and every catch was not just for me but for every individual who had faced discrimination and prejudice. I played for the kids in the stands who saw a reflection of themselves in me, and for my brothers who had fought valiantly beside me. As the season progressed, the barriers began to crumble, one game at a time. I faced hostility, but I also experienced remarkable support. Slowly, I began to change the narrative. My success on the field sparked conversations across the country, leading to a greater awareness of racial equality. I was not just breaking records, I was breaking chains. Looking back, I realized that my journey was not just about baseball, it was about paving the way for others. I had transformed into a symbol of hope, proving that dreams could be achieved, no matter how daunting the obstacles may seem. My experiences in the war had taught me the value of perseverance, courage, and the importance of fighting for what is right. Now, as I stand before you, I urge you to embrace your dreams, to fight against the odds, and to stand up for what is right. Whether it's on the field or in your community, remember that every step you take can inspire others. Together, we can break barriers and change the world, just as I did. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more, please leave a comment below sharing your thoughts, hit that like button, subscribe, and don't forget to turn on notifications for more inspiring tales. Together, let's continue to uplift each other and dream big.